I am thinking deeply about where the greatest attack is being leveled and whether we need to focus our energies on that space. On the other hand, we're a broad-based funder, right? We fund across healthcare, education, the environment, the arts, law and legal issues, housing, hunger, and every single one of them is under attack. It's a little overwhelming.
This is Hourglass, the podcast of United Way of King County in Seattle. Coming up, a conversation between United Way Chief Impact Officer Regina Malveaux and Washington Women's Foundation President and CEO Maria Kolby-Wolfe about the efforts of nonprofits and philanthropy to address the nation's ever-changing political landscape. We'll also hear from United Way President and CEO Gordon McHenry Jr. about our work during these challenging times, and we'll spotlight our free tax preparation campaign. I'm your host, Joe Burris. Thanks for tuning in. According to the IRS, there are about 2 million nonprofit organizations in the United States, amassing about $2.6 trillion in revenue. Nonprofit organizations provide services and resources to address public needs. They raise awareness about concerns in our communities. They employ advocacy and influence policy. They conduct research, and they raise money from individual, private, public, and philanthropic donors to support charitable causes. United Way of King County is proud to be a nonprofit organization that works side by side with communities to create an equitable future for everyone. Like many nonprofit organizations, we are concerned about the current political landscape amid several proposals from our federal government that could threaten many nonprofits' works or their very existence. From federal legislation that could revoke the nonprofit status of organizations accused of funding terrorism, to recent White House executive orders and memos to freeze federal funding to nonprofit programs, the sector is facing unprecedented uncertainty. According to Urban Institute, 27% of nonprofit organizations received federal grant funding in 2022, while 10% received federal contract funding. State, federal, and local government funding make up about 30% of all nonprofit revenue, Urban Institute said. According to a National Council on Nonprofits report, about 3% of donations to nonprofits come from foundations. And that's why amid this period of uncertainty for the sector, many are calling on philanthropy to do more. In a February 10th article on its website, Borealis Philanthropy of Minneapolis called for the sector to respond to the escalating crisis, saying, quote, "The philanthropic sector must be radically coordinated to sustain and scale both rapid response and long-term investments in grassroots movements," end quote. And in a March 6 blog post on its site, the Center for Effective Philanthropy discussed how it believes the sector can respond, stating, quote, "This moment will test the strength we've gained as a sector as we've navigated past crises. Now the question is, was that muscle built to look good in selfies or to do the heavy lifting of social change?" End quote. Many foundations have answered the call to be proactive and do the heavy lifting. Among them, the Washington Women's Foundation, a Seattle-based organization that supports community transformation statewide. The Washington Women's Foundation is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year, having invested more than $22 million in Washington nonprofits since its founding in 1995. Those nonprofits include United Way of King County grantees like Chief Seattle Club, Potlatch Fund, Voices of Tomorrow, Para los Niños, and Rainier Beach Action Coalition. Shortly after the first White House executive orders were issued in January, Washington Women's Foundation President and CEO Maria Kolby-Wolfe issued a message to the foundation's membership and its nonprofit partners, acknowledging the fraught and confusing time while offering online resources and information. The Women's Foundation also issued a statement of commitment to its membership that underscored its unwavering support of racial and gender equity. United Way of King County echoes the Washington Women's Foundation's message to our community partners. As we have stated in our podcast and our blog post, we will continue to support and advocate for the communities we are proud to serve. Later this month, United Way and the Washington Women's Foundation will join others in the philanthropic sector to discuss solutions and responses to the current political landscape. Recently, United Way Chief Impact Officer Regina Malveaux sat down with Washington Women's Foundation's Maria Kolby-Wolfe for a conversation about the efforts of philanthropy and nonprofits to address the uncertain political landscape. Here is that discussion.
Maria!
Hello.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited to speak with you today about the current state in the nonprofit and philanthropic sectors as it reacts to this barrage of executive orders from the White House. Thanks for taking the time to chat with me today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you. And while I wish that we were coming together for happier reasons, I'm very happy to be with you today and to be in community with this conversation with folks that are listening.
Likewise. Thank you. As you may know, the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation recently said that it will increase its giving over the next 2 years in response to what it calls a crisis prompted by the White House's attempts to freeze federal funding on grants and foreign aid. How has the Women's Foundation decided to provide leadership and additional support to its partners?
Yeah. There's a couple of different ways. And some of these things, of course, are still in flux. I have to keep reminding myself that it's only been 6 weeks. And so there's several folds in which we're trying to go forward. The first was a statement that we made, making very clear that we were not going to be changing our focus on race and gender equity, regardless of whatever was happening on the other Washington. That was absolutely not something that we were interested in. This is who we are and what we do. We do work trying to do something about racial and gender inequity in this state.
Yes.
Period. That's what we do. And that doesn't change. And frankly, there's a lot of organizations that can't make that shift. Women's organizations being one of them, we certainly can't. It is a privilege to be able to change things so that you don't have to worry about it. We are not one of those people in such a place of privilege. Our trans community can't change the name of what they're doing. None of those things can be altered. So we took a stand in that regard to say we weren't going to be changing. The second step, of course, was to ask what our grantees were in need of. And the first thing, of course, that we always hear is about more money. And that, in this particular case, is even more, I think, obvious that that's necessary, that foundations step into that space that's being hollowed out by the federal government's
Absolutely.
And so, two things. One, we're looking at if we can raise more dollars. We are not the kind of foundation, we're sort of unusual in that we don't have a large endowment. The dollars that we give, we raise out of the women who are interested in doing more for their state. So it's about going back to our members and saying, we're going to need you to give more because it's needed and it's desperate and it's that time. We have increased the percentage of dollars that we're giving from our endowment this year. So we have already done that. We'd already planned that prior to. I know the MacArthur Foundation has moved up by 1%. We doubled what we were pulling out of our
Wonderful.
And just a little side note on MacArthur. They're giving $150 million more dollars, which seems really impressive, right? That's the other 1% of the dollars they're giving out of their earnings. They're sitting on $8.7 billion. And I feel like at this particular juncture in time, it is pouring outside. Man, it is a deluge. Now is the time to get out the umbrellas and really dig deep into those. Maybe $1 billion of umbrellas would be helpful. So that's aside. I'm very glad that they're stepping forward. I'm glad that they're putting out that challenge to other foundations to do that step up. So asking our members for more and rethinking the way in which we give. Now, we have a pretty standard giving. Please submit your LOI, do this, then we will talk with you, and then we will give you money. One of the things that we're actually asking our members right now, surveys in the field, how or what should we do to respond and rapidly to the needs? Should legal defense fund, is that what's needed? A wellness fund. The stress on our nonprofit partners, the trauma that this inflicts, I was just in DC for myself, not for any sort of political reasons. I have a lot of friends there, all being impacted by these federal decisions. The trauma is nationwide. Is there a conversation about wellness and how to take care of your staff that needs to be had that foundations can fund and help support? Are there financial advising that needs to happen for our grantees that we could help support? So we're still thinking about that, but definitely going forward with this new sense of if we have to pivot the way we do our grant making, then we have to pivot.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for mentioning grantees. Since the executive orders began, what responses have you received from your nonprofit grantees? What seem to be their most pressing issues, and are there any stories that stand out to you?
Yeah. Well, there's a bunch of concerns about, there's never a time in a nonprofit when financial concerns aren't present. This just seems to have ramped everything up an extra degree. Let me pull that back a little bit. There's sort of 3 different organization types that I'm seeing responding in different ways. The first is the type that has a lot of federal funding in their way in which they go forward. I guess it's 30 or 40% of the funding that comes into nonprofits is from the federal government or from government agencies. There's a lot of worry about those dollars being pulled. It will mean millions for some of our organizations. Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, for instance, is an organization that receives a lot of federal funding to defend immigrants through the immigration system. And I can't imagine that they're going to be able to keep a lot of that, not with this administration. So that federal funding means millions of dollars for people not getting legal defense the way they should. The second rung is the ones for whom they've gone for federal dollars, people going for the NEA grants, for instance, the NIH grants. Maybe these aren't millions of dollars in the organization. Maybe it's thousands, maybe it's tens of thousands. But it was still money they sort of counted on. For instance, one of our grantees mentioned that they frequently go for the NEA's grant that supports bringing the arts to underserved populations. Mm-hmm. That grant is just not happening this year.
Yes.
They eliminated it.
Yeah.
And so that's $10,000 that they've gotten before. They had a pretty good sense that they might get it again, no longer part of it. So that's a little bit of a hustle, right? A little bit of shift in, okay, where are we going to get those dollars? Certainly something that happens all the time to nonprofits, but unexpected when it happens from a funder like the federal government. So there's that scramble for finances. And then there's the conversation around the terminologies and the words that are allowed to be used.
Which seems to be the most challenging for grantees right now.
Exactly. So the NEAs...
The
National Endowment of the Arts. Their recent decision, see if I can put this together in a way that's concise. They have sort of rolled out to grantees that there are certain terminologies that are not allowed. I believe the NIH also did this. That
I believe 13 words.
Exactly. There's a bunch of words you're not allowed to use in your grant. And not just in your grant to the federal government, but there's also the edict to not do any DEI work, not just for the grant that they're receiving, but in any of their programs or any of their practices across the entire organization. And that also includes being willing to sign on to every presidential executive order, including those that are deeply transphobic and homophobic.
Yeah, so grantees are being asked to actually certify that they are not doing this work.
And it's a personal certification by the person who's signing the grant.
Yes.
Which is horrifying and chilling. Possible to do for some organizations to erase things. There's a whole conversation. I just read a whole article about, here are words you could use instead. Trying to figure out some way to continue to do the work that's so important, but not say you're doing the work that's so important. Some organizations will be able to do that. Some organizations will not. Word trans is not allowed. If you're a trans organization, you do not have the privilege of erasing yourself.
Absolutely.
Horrible thing to say.
One of the most encouraging things I've heard in some of the spaces that I've been in where they've been talking about how to help organizations interpret these edicts that are coming down is a do not obey in advance. Because
yes.
what we're learning is what's been many of the orders that have been issued are actually factually illegal. And so I think that during this time, organizations like United Way and the Washington Women's Foundation being able to provide information or point folks to information that helps them interpret how to respond is so
That's
helpful.
such a good.
This was one of the things that I was really excited about, seeing a communication come out of your organization early on, where you really, actually within the first 48 hours, where you really pointed folks in the direction of where to access resources to help with the interpretation. So I wanted to say that similar to the Washington Women's Foundation, when we at United Way of King County reached out to several of our grantees, we heard a lot of fear, a lot of confusion, and a lot of uncertainty. As a result, we collected information and stories from our grantees, shared them with state lawmakers in Washington, D.C., wanted to learn more again about how you've worked to ensure grantees, partners, and your foundation's membership will continue your work. How have you communicated that?
I think the education factor is a big one. One of the things we're talking about on staff is how do we continue to share out, as you say, that information around where can you go to get the good information versus the information that's being filtered through a lot of fear and a lot of confusions. Being there when our grantees ask questions or have concerns about the way in which we're granting and assuring them that our granting is still going to be supportive of their work. And reaching out to other foundations and funders. I think there's a conversation to our members and to other people of the donor class about what the time requires. There's an organization of the community organizing for wealthy people, for people with money and for organizations with money. It is time for you to community organize and be part of the community that is right now in need has been in need for some time, but is in even more need.
Not just in need, but under attack.
And under attack,
yes.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So during key times like this, many organizations can consider what to continue, what to cease, what to begin. Are there any changes that the Washington Women's Foundation is considering in light of this feedback from your grantees?
Yeah, I admit that I am thinking deeply about where the greatest attack is being leveled and whether we need to focus our energies on that space. On the other hand, we're a broad-based funder, right? We fund across healthcare, education, the environment, the arts, law and legal issues, housing, hunger, and every single one of them is under attack. It's a little overwhelming.
Very overwhelming.
Right? I'm trying to focus which one of these, all very vital issues, seem like the most important. I'm not sure we're going to be able to do that. My only response now is just we have to find more dollars to drive towards all of the organizations that are really going to struggle in this new
moment in time.
space. Yeah, I won't say new world order because I think that's what it is.
We will not will that.
Absolutely not.
Many of us in this space are already sharing best practices and talking solutions and strategies. I recently attended an event hosted by Funders Together to End Homelessness and know that many foundations recently came together for advocacy on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. That was hosted by the United Philanthropy Forum and the Council on Foundations. What are the messages that you're hearing that foundations are issuing to Congress?
I think the strongest voices are the ones that I've been speaking to have said that what they really want Congress to understand is philanthropy cannot fill in this gap. You cannot go out to the private sector and fill in the gaps of what is missing, and underscoring the lives that are about to be deeply damaged or already being damaged. by those loss of funds. Bringing in stories to Congress folks about individual people being impacted by the fact that these dollars are no longer coming down the pike. But that piece of the fact that the philanthropy can't solve the problems, and that's a strange thing for a foundation president to say, but the federal government is just able to move the kinds of money that is needed to address the problems that all of us want to see fixed. It's our job to push them to do that. This is the opposite of fixing problems. This will be creating problems that I'm not sure we even have a full grasp of what it will look like. I'm sitting here watching measles outbreaks, and I'm watching dysentery, and I'm watching these things pop up on the news that 10 years ago would have never have imagined that this would be something that we would be facing in this country.
I think what so many people don't realize, particularly as it relates to human services, most of our nation's human services are, and the federal funds that we've been talking about, these are spaces where the federal government has decided this is a critical need and service that is necessary for the population. And we're contracting with our experts in the nonprofit sector to provide these services.
All the housing services.
So by virtue of freezing those funds or eliminating those funds, it is effectively the federal government dumping the need on the private sector. And it, as you said, I so appreciate that folks are communicating to Congress that the sector, even though it is working hard to step up, cannot fill that larger gap. I wanted to just finally say, I know that later this month, philanthropic partners across the nation and here in Puget Sound are gathering to talk about what we can do collectively. There's been much conversation about the role of philanthropy to address such issues without giving the appearance of being partisan. What do you believe is the role of philanthropy at times like this?
Philanthropy and people who are in the philanthropic realm are operating from a position of extraordinary privilege and power and protection. Washington Women's Foundation is protected. It's protected by the power of the people who are members. It's protected, and we have a voice. And if there is never a better time to use a voice than when you are protected, when you get to use it.
Yes.
And we can step forward as funders, as philanthropists, as people who are able to step in that place of privilege. And we can say, yes, we have the power to tell you that this is not the direction that we are interested in having. Philanthropy, it's been a long time that the philanthropy has stepped and has stood a little bit in the shadows of pushing their privilege into a place that can actually move mountains.
But we certainly are in the time where that's absolutely what's needed.
This is exactly it. There is not, if not now, when? When are you going to do it? There is not a better time than now. Well, a better time would have been about 20, 30 years ago, but in general, right now, the world really is kind of catching on fire. And it is time to step up. But the buckets of water of funding that you have in your foundations and in your pocketbooks, if you are so privileged. And now is the time to give it. That is the message that I want foundations to embrace as they look at how much they're going to be pulling out of their endowments. It's a message I want to hear millionaires and billionaires who have the funding and have the heart to know they need to dig a lot deeper, because the pain is going to be real. I'm so worried about so many people and our environment and our healthcare and our education systems. We have a lot of work to do. And if you have the power, privilege, and protection to do it, get in the game.
Maria, thank you so much. That's an incredible message to end on. Grateful to speak with you today.
Always.
Grateful to be a partner with you in this work, and looking forward to how we lean in together as organizations and rallying the folks who support our organizations to, as you said, really lean into their privilege and help those in need. So again, thanks so much. And
thank you, Regina. It's been always a privilege. Always a pleasure.
For more information about the Washington Women's Foundation, log on to WAWONENSFDN.org. And now a word from United Way of King County President and CEO Gordon McHenry Jr.
Increasingly challenging times, it's really important that folks who are part of the United Way community know that we are 100% committed to continuing to do the work we have been doing, the work that is rooted in equity, the work that is aspirational, so that we have a region where everyone thrives. It's important for you to know that we see you, we hear you. We will continue to serve and support if you allow us that privilege. It's important to know that we are going to increase our proximity to the communities we're privileged to serve. We are going to be a courageous advocate for policies that uplift folks, and we're going to be a courageous advocate against policies and practices that serve to oppress or harm. If you give us the ability to be your partner, we will not let you down. We will stay strong. And
it's tax time again, and United Way of King County is offering free tax services to individuals who make less than $80,000 a year, or less than $96,000 for non-single filers. Funded by United Way, the IRS, and the City of Seattle, the free tax preparation campaign runs until Sunday, April 19th. Services are available at more than a dozen locations across King County, including El Centro de la Raza and West Seattle Community Resource Center in Seattle, Hope Link in Shoreline, South Center Mall in Tukwila, and the Public Health Center in Kent. Virtual service is also available through our online tax site. United Way tax preparation specialists will help clients understand their tax situations and take advantage of refunds like the Earned Income Credit, the Child Tax Credit, and the Working Families Tax Credit. Last year, our free tax campaign served more than 12,000 people and leveraged more than $16 million in tax refunds. And we look forward to preparing your taxes this year. For more information, log on to freetaxexperts.org. At United Way of King County, we are working side by side with communities to build an equitable future for everyone. Hourglass United Way is a podcast that highlights how we and our partners spend time making a difference in our communities. Our work is made possible by the generous donations from people like you. Please send comments and suggestions about our podcast to hourglassunitedway@gmail.com. To learn more about our work or to support United Way, log on to uwkc.org. I'm your host, Joe Burris. Thanks for listening. Until next time.